Hey there guys, this is Flamsaron, aka YouTube's Tasuke, and I am once again dipping into the world of video game reviews. What video game am I reviewing, you might be asking? Well, it's a little game called Dragon Ball Z Kakarot, yeah. That ARPG that's semi-open world. For those of you who don't know what any of those words mean, this is essentially a action RPG Dragon Ball Z game that's kind of open world, not really like Skyrim or Minecraft, but kind of similar, maybe. But yeah, I'm a Dragon Ball guy, so figured I should, do my part and review it. I've had the game beaten for a while, but I tend to take a little while with actually doing record reviews. I say that every single time, but I always have to make sure y'all understand what I go through. Nah. But, yeah, so I'm going to review that game now. To start off with, I got the PS4 version, as you can probably tell. In fact, I actually got the Collector's Edition, which, for Dragon Ball games, I don't really do that often. This is kind of a new thing for me. Even though I say Dragon Ball is like my favorite franchise of all time, I never think to get the Collector's Edition of the games. So I decided, you know what? I'm going to do that for once. And I actually did an unboxing on the Mizuho podcast channel. So there'll be a link in the description for that as well if you guys want to see that. Troy did one as well. So, that was a pretty fun time. But the Collector's Edition came with some nice stuff. I'm keeping most of it in the box. In fact, the only thing I actually legitimately took out, like permanently, was the game. As far as I can tell, there's no real special artwork or anything with it, or any like special like Collector's Edition label anywhere. It's just the game proper. Though I definitely liked looking at the art book for what little I did, and I haven't taken it out of its little wrap or plastic protector thing, but the figure is also pretty cool, pretty big as well. The box itself was pretty massive. This is probably the largest Collector's Edition of anything I've ever gotten besides the Tales of Eternia premium box, but that's more of a width thing. This is more of like a height thing, I think. Of course, the box itself, again, is pretty massive. So now, in regards to the story of this game, I'll go ahead and say, it's Dragon Ball Z, so I'm not going to like go into as much detail as I normally would with other stuff, mainly just because it's Dragon Ball Z. Like, I'm going to mainly focus on what's different and what's changed. But like the Shenmue 3 review, I think I'm going to start with the actual mechanics and go into the story secondary. Considering the story in this game, this is a story-based game. It's not like Xenoverse or Fighters or anything before it. This is a straight-up action RPG. Kind of free-roaming, but not really. It's more sectioned off. You can maybe say it's instance. This is very similar to the Legacy of Goku games, in fact. I imagine I wasn't the only one making the comparisons. And that's why I said in both of my videos talking about like the news of this game, why I said this was sort of like my dream Dragon Ball game. And again, whether or not it actually lived up to that expectation, I will let you know near the end during my final verdict section, as if I actually have real sections. I jump around a lot, y'all already know this. But yeah, so let's start with the mechanics first of the game. So, like I said, it's an semi-open world action RPG. There are kind of random battles, or at least they're sort of structured as such. As far as I can tell, the game doesn't really necessarily load in too many extra assets when going into the battle mode. Or at the very least, it's pretty seamless. But combat took a little bit of time getting used to. I think that's mainly because I was so used to playing Xenoverse. Because at first glance, the games do seem pretty similar. Obviously, in this game, the scope of the fighting arena, if you will, is much larger. As far as I know, there's no way to escape from battles just by flying out. It's more about just avoiding them altogether before they hit you. Though you can do a thing where if the enemy is a low enough level, you can like bash into them and like one-shot them, and you'll get experience that way. When you're flying, because you can do your flying, you can do like the really fast flying, which that's pretty useful. And that can be a decent way to grind if you've set everything up, but I tried doing it. It didn't really work. So far, it hasn't really worked too well for me. Though before I started recording this review, I hadn't actually touched the game ever since I finished it. I had been kind of waiting because I wanted to make sure for the gameplay footage I showed a fair amount of the subquests. Because obviously I'm going to show like all the post-game stuff. I'm not going to do what I did with Shenmue 3 where I showed the beginning part. I don't know why I'm comparing this to Shenmue 3. Probably because like those were like the two big games that I kind of played back to back with each other. But yeah, so combat, it took a little bit of time to get used to, and quite frankly, I wasn't really jiving with it. But then once I started doing the more advanced techniques, I started to actually have a lot more fun with it. Like, you could just like mash the attack button and do your specials and your energy blast, but you can actually do a few other things as well. Some slight combos, like you can do sort of like a burst thing if you do like, for the sake of talking about the game neutrally, attack button, attack button, attack button, charge button. You do like a little energy burst thing where you knock the enemy away. And then you can also do a attack button, attack button, attack button, energy blast button where you do like a specialty energy move. Like Piccolo does like this swipe where he swipes with what looks like an energy blade or something, or like a large one. I say energy blade, but it's not like he doesn't do like the Zamasu with like the little hand thing. It's more like he just like slashes at the energy or something. And Goku does kind of like just like a short blast. Vegeta does like the energy volley and whatnot. But that being said, I guess I could quickly mention the playable characters, which that's as it stands right now, because again, I'm talking about this game pre-DLC. But at the moment, the playable characters are Goku, Gohan, Vegeta, Trunks, and Piccolo. I think I got them all. Those are like the main ones you can actually play as. Though Tien, Yamcha, Goten, Kid Trunks, Krillin, and Android 18 are what are known as support characters, which they're basically like your party members. You have a party of 3 at all times. You can't switch between them, obviously, even if you're playing as as all of like the actual main playable characters. You have your support characters where like you can press a button and they'll do like a special move or something. And you can also do like group attacks with them, which do a lot of damage, which are pretty cool. You have to like get the gauge up. There's like a little gauge that you have to get up, which is represented, I believe, by like the circle that surrounds their profile or their portrait or whatever. But unfortunately, they're not all playable. Oh, and Chaozu as well. I forgot about him. Not that it really matters much. But that's a little disappointing just because, I feel like for a game like this, it really would be cool, especially for the sections where Goku isn't around or any of like the other major characters aren't around. It'd be nice to be able to play as some of the other characters. Now, I say Goten is like a support character, but there is a section where you get to play as him for a little bit. You can't really do much with it, which I find that very intriguing. And obviously, due to the story, there's a part where he plays Gotenks, and there's also a part where he plays Vegito. So there are other like minor characters that you get to play as like during sections. It's kind of like in Boost Fury, again going back to the Legacy of Goku series, where in Boost Fury you had a chance of playing as Videl for a little bit, and then you had another chance of playing as Hercule, or Mr. Satan, which is what he's called here. In terms of the script, I know it's a little early to be talking about story, and they kind of go together, but as far as the scripting goes, obviously it's the English dub, and they use like the established or some established names and terms, but in regards to Hercule versus Mr. Satan, they use Mr. Satan, which makes sense, and Goku refers to himself as Son Goku a time or two. And the one that was probably the most interesting to me, I haven't watched the dub of Kai this far ahead. But the character known as Daikaio in the Majin Buu arc, in the dub they called him Daikaio, kind of like how they call God Kami, because that's what Kami means. But like in the original version, that's more like his title. Whereas in the dub, he's known as Kami, which I'm generally fine with, but I'm just trying to kind of let y'all know sort of how the script is for those who are actually interested in that kind of thing. Though, again, to go back to Daikaio, here they called him the Grand Supreme Kai, which makes sense because, again, like Kami, they sort of took his title and like slapped his name onto it, which is okay. I kind of like Grand Supreme Kai better just because, especially considering given where Super's going with the Moro arc, how he reappears. It'd be kind of nice for him to have his quote-unquote proper name. But yeah, for the most part, the script and terminology is pretty standard for the Dragon Ball Z games, or Dragon Ball games for that matter. Mainly because that's one thing that's sort of been a trend lately, really starting with Burst Limit, I would argue. Technically as far as Budokai 1, but I would argue that it really kind of made its mark in Burst Limit, is that the script from the show and the script from the games, and the script from the manga as well, or the text from the manga, they're all kind of being translated and localized differently, which is why you'll have lines that characters will say in Xenoverse, for example, where Zamasu says, "Don't you dare give orders to a god, mortal!" Whereas in the English dub of the anime, he says, "Mortals don't get to tell gods what to do." It's like, they make little changes here and there with diction and sort of how characters talk. And especially when a new character is introduced in the game, a lot of times they'll sound a little different in the game versus when they actually make their animated debut. Zamasu being actually a pretty good example. Because in the dub of Super, his voice is a little softer in the dub, and I think going forward, assuming they go that far in this game, they might maybe do something with that. So yeah, the script is more or less what you would expect from a Dragon Ball game, meaning that they go along with what they can from the dub, but they're also going to kind of do their own thing, which I kind of like because that sort of freshens up the experience a little bit, especially for those who remember watching Dragon Ball, particularly Dragon Ball Z actually, on Toonami, and they kind of get like this newer experience, like maybe they didn't watch Kai, or maybe they didn't go back and watch the sub, or maybe whatever. So that's kind of cool. Now, the voice acting itself, I hate to say this, but it is a little hit or miss sometimes. Like there are a couple of times, particularly Chris Sabat with Vegeta and some other characters, where like the voices tend to kind of fall a little flat. I think this is due to the fact that most of the time with these games, the voiceovers are recorded. It's kind of hard to say when exactly in the development cycle they're recorded, but they're recorded generally out of context. Because even with, they're either recorded out of context or they're recorded very quickly. And truthfully, I think it's more that they're recorded really quickly. Because you would think that how many times they've all these actors have said these lines, that they would kind of know the general idea of the context. But a lot of times, like a different director might maybe want something different, or maybe the scene calls for something different. Because the way the scenes are formatted, it's actually very much like a game of its type, to where there's not a lot of movement in the character, like for the basic like in-game cutscenes. There are some, like for when Goku goes Super Saiyan, when Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2, where they really touch up I think it might be pre-rendered. It actually looks like really, really kind of crisp and nice, a little bit nicer than the main game. Though the graphics are good. Like I'm not trying to dig on the graphics, but it's just like for those scenes, it seems like they really put a lot of emphasis there, and that's when a lot of it looks like maybe even motion capture. That might be kind of, I probably not, but it does kind of look like motion capture. But then there are also some scenes where like the dialogue will kind of play out on its own. They do a little bit more movement there, but for the most part, the animations and like the standard in-game cutscenes are pretty low key, and maybe that has something to do with the voiceover. I think it's mainly more just recording the scenes without context and trying to do them really fast. Everyone does a decent job. It's just that a few of the lines from some characters comes off as a little flat at certain times, though that's not always the case. In fact, I should maybe note that in regards to Frieza, he's voiced by Damon Mills in this game instead of Chris Ayers, which is telling me that this game was probably recorded around the same time as Fighters, maybe a little bit after or even before. So I'm guessing maybe these last two big games, Fighters and Kakarot, were probably recorded around the same time, but sort of different sort of like circumstances with different context or something, because they're made by different developers for one thing. I guess that's one thing I should probably mention. This game is developed by CyberConnect 2, which are the people who make the Naruto games, or they've been making the Naruto games. Like, I think it's Ultimate Ninja Storm is the one that's currently going on. And this company is known for making really in-depth story modes in those Naruto games, and I think that's the reason why they were picked to make this game, or I don't know if they were picked, but regardless, they're the ones making the game. As far as I know, this is their first time making a Dragon Ball game, and I'll go ahead and say I think they did fine. I think they did good with their first time making a Dragon Ball game. But yeah, so that's kind of where I stand on the basic voice acting. I also do want to note that we did get our new Mr. Satan, since for those who don't know, the Japanese voice actor for Mr. Satan, Unsho Ishizuka, passed away due to lung cancer. I played the game with the English dub. The one thing that was actually kind of cool was when you would beat each story section of the game, they would have a cast list in the corner as like the epilogue cutscene was going on, and they would list both the English and the Japanese voice actor. That was the only reason why I know this factoid, but yeah, our new voice actor for Mr. Satan, the Japanese version, is an actor named Masashi Ebara, who I personally recognize as Max from Tales of Eternia. He was also, I think his name is Sods, or however you say his name, from Final Fantasy 13. Quite frankly, I was actually really surprised that they cast him. He was the last person I expect. Based just seeing his name, I could hear the voice. I'm like, oh yeah, that actually fits. That actually fits really well. So I actually think just knowing who he is, I can tell, like, oh yeah, he definitely fits. I haven't heard it myself, but I can already tell based on what I have heard that yeah, he would fit. Where I'm surprised is sort of the fact that they picked him. My first thought was maybe going to be someone like Tesho Genda or Ryuza Buro Otomo or even Akio Otsuka. Like, I was thinking they were maybe going to pick someone who already voices another Dragon Ball character, or someone from One Piece, because that's one thing that they like to do with Dragon Ball voice acting in the Japanese, on the Japanese side of things. They like to kind of pick, or they like to kind of take from One Piece, I noticed. Like, look up any of the new voice actors in Super, particularly the Tournament of Power, and I would wager that 9 times out of 10, maybe 8 times out of 10, they voiced in One Piece. You'll get some other exceptions. Like, I know his actor's big claim to fame was that he was the Japanese dub voice actor for Hugh Jackman's Wolverine and all the different X-Men and Wolverine movies. And I think probably Logan as well. But yes, but other than that, I would say most of the time One Piece and Dragon Ball voice actors tend to kind of overlap. They may not necessarily be looking at One Piece and pulling the actors from there. I suppose they could be, and both are done at Toei Animation. I think the voiceovers for both of them are done by Aoni Productions. But at any rate, it definitely surprised me who they got. But again, I think just knowing who it is, because even though I haven't heard how he does Mr. Satan, I have a general idea of how he sounds based on how I've heard him as Max in Tales of Eternia. So hearing that voice with Mr. Satan's face on, I'm like, oh yeah, that makes perfect sense. That actually fits really well. And he's actually going to sound a little bit more like Daisuke Gori as well. So I'm definitely glad he got cast. But other than that, I didn't notice any other new people. Obviously, Aya Hisakawa is playing Bulma now. So that's how things are now. But other than that, seemingly all the same people in both the English and Japanese that we had heard up to this point. No one in particular new that I noticed. Android 21 does make an appearance as like this training chick that you can talk to and that you can also see out and about. I think she might be someone different. It was kind of hard to tell, and I didn't really pay much attention to her in terms of her actress. At the end of the game, they do give a full cast list. I don't think they listed anyone for Android 21 whenever she appeared. It would have been after Frieza, I believe, is when she shows up. But I also should know that there are also some original characters that show up. Like, obviously, Bonyu, who's Jace's, I think, cousin or something. Basically looks like a thick female Jace. She's an original character. She doesn't really show up until, like, the post-game. If you pre-order the game, like the base game, you got access to her early. And I don't know what all they're planning to do with her. And also, this is talking more about the stories a little bit. But that Melon guy who's like a member of the Frieza army, but he wants to be a cook. He was pretty interesting. He's kind of minor, but still pretty fun. And then also the tourists who are like traversing the different planets and they're like really oblivious to everything. That was pretty funny. But so far, mostly familiar faces. I'll talk more about that when we go into story. Because I'll go into subquests as well around that time. Because they kind of coincide a little bit. But continuing with audio, let me talk about the music. Given that this is, at this point, the modern Dragon Ball experience, anything referencing the anime is going to be Kikuchi, and that's true here as well. I'm not the biggest fan of the Kikuchi score. Quite frankly, I'm not looking back at it. I wasn't really too big on Falconer either. I hate to say that. I like more songs from Falconer than I do Kikuchi. If you ask me, I really liked Kenji Yamamoto, but you know, we're not getting him back. But yeah, the arrangements of Kikuchi's music here was nice. But there's also some original songs that play as well. Like, for example, one of the ones that I really like, that really pumped me up during this section, was the song that plays when you're playing a Super Saiyan Goku fighting Frieza. It's all like a like, my adrenaline was just like through the roof with this section. It was awesome, and they play it a couple times as well. And every time it plays, like, it would just pump me up so much. That's in my opinion, that's the best song of the entire soundtrack. But then they also play some, classic Kikuchi music. Like the one that always stands out to me is the but you can hear that I'm doing it kind of faster, and this is something I want to kind of bring up, which I found kind of strange with the music. The version they play in the song is like a slower one, because it's supposed to be sort of like a song of dreams, like they play that version, but I know it is more of a faster song. But during the Android 20 fight, which that's a ball game in and of itself, but the Android 20 fight, or Dr. Gero, fight with Piccolo, I noticed they were playing a song that sounded like it was trying to be that Kikuchi song, but like it was almost like they lost the license for that particular song. So like, okay, let's just do a song that's similar, because it's like dun 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 dun, something like that. I'm just like, Why didn't they just do a faster version of the na 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 or whatever? You probably couldn't even tell what song I was trying to do. Out of context, at least. Context is like my new favorite word. I've been saying that a lot lately. But yeah, I found that pretty strange. Obviously, it doesn't really. You can't really argue that they couldn't use that song because they do use it. I guess maybe it was one of those things where they didn't want to use the too many variations of the same song. They use a couple different versions of Chala He Chala, which is sort of like this game's theme song. I will go ahead and say also that them not switching the opening cinematic to We Gotta Power during the Majin Buu arc was a major missed opportunity. Even when you get to that section, it's still Chala He Chala. I get that that's like the anthem of Dragon Ball Z, but I'm more nostalgic about We Gotta Power because when I got the subtapes way back in the day, the one that I had of Dragon Ball Z and the two I had of GT, the one for Dragon Ball Z was the Gotenks and Super Buu fight. So I heard We Gotta Power. In fact, I don't even think I heard Chala He Chala until I somehow watched the Mexican dub on Telemundo. I think it was either that or it was in the one of the uncut Ocean dub cast movies back then on the VHS. I don't exactly remember. It might have been Tree of Might, I think. But it was definitely a missed opportunity to not use We Gotta Power. I think that's a major crime. But besides that, and just the confusion with some of the music that I mentioned before, I actually really like the music. Me being not too big into the Kikuchi score, I kind of went into it with like low expectations. Because I really like the Chala He Chala stuff. And I like the orchestral version of We Gotta Power. But other than that, like I'm not too big, or I wasn't too big on the music that they were playing, so I kind of went into the music with like low expectations. But actually, I really dug it. It was nice. I found that I really like the Kikuchi music when it's arranged to sound more modern. Either that, or if they have really high quality masters, like they did for Kai when they had to rescore it, where it's like it sounds really clear. Like I actually really like Piccolo's song, like the dun 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 dun. But like I said, in terms of the Japanese music, I was generally more of a Kenji Yamamoto guy, or sort of like a non-Kikuchi guy. Like I really like Solid State Scouter from the Bardock movie or special or whatever, which that'd be cool if they throw that in as DLC. But we're not really there yet. That's more of a that goes along with the verdict, I think, final verdict, if you will. But yeah, so music, pretty good. Other mechanics and stuff to note before I get into story, I guess. You can get the Dragon Balls. It's actually really easy to get the Dragon Balls, which that's a little bit of a detriment, just because I feel it should be maybe a little bit harder. Like I really only used it during the quote unquote intermissions, which is basically like sort of like the in between of the story where they let you play as any character you want that you have at the time. And you can do like different stuff there, and it's more of just like to prepare for like the next arc, which you could truthfully do at any time, but it's mainly just for like truthfully it's for like doing any extra side quests that you missed and like getting extra insight on what some of these other characters are doing, which it's kind of cool doing that. But anyway, whenever I would get the Dragon Balls during these times, which I only got twice, I would just use them to get more money. Because that was one thing I noticed that I was always kind of low on. There's not really an easy way to make money besides selling stuff and hunting dinosaurs, which you can do, which that's kind of fun. The landscapes are definitely really fun to kind of explore, and there's plenty of dinosaurs that you can see. And you can, by the way, also you can use the Dragon Balls to wish back enemies that you've killed, and you get little side quests with them, and you don't kill them, but they're all like you get a chance to fight them again. It's kind of fun. You have to do it with specific characters though. Like what I noticed so far I've only done Raditz, but I noticed that you have to play as Piccolo. You can have whoever you want on your team, which by now you've probably noticed that my current team is Vegeta, Future Trunks, which you actually do get them back in post game, which is cool, and Tien. So it's my same team as in Fighters. Though I'd like to be able to actually play as Tien. I don't really like that he's just a support character, but yeah. So you can wish for different stuff with the Dragon Balls, and it's how you get some rare items as well, and like different level up points. Which I did that like a couple times as well, because truthfully they give you like 3 wishes, where I really just wanted the money one. For like healing items and whatnot, the Vita drinks, which those ended up being really useful, and also you can get sensu beans, which that's pretty nice as well, because you can get a lot if you wait a while before harvesting them, because you have to go to Korin's tower and talk to Korin to get the little beans. He's like, they're ready now, and then he'll give you like 9 or whatever, depending on how long you wait. So that's kind of cool, just like little things like that. It almost kind of made it feel like I was actually playing the show a little bit, because I remember like they were always trying to round up sensu beans when fighting the bad guy. So I definitely feel like the immersion was there for sure. Though one thing that was kind of annoying was that if I were at either Kami's Lookout or Korin's Tower, I couldn't jump off the side and go all the way to the bottom. It would load up a "Do you want to go?" screen, and that was kind of dumb. Of course, this is due to the game being instance, where every area is like, it's a big open thing, but they're all like instanced off. Like if you go far enough, it'll try to take you to, at least I think, it'll try to take you to the world map, where you can go somewhere else. There are plenty of places that are kind of connected to each other, and if you look at the world map, you'll see like, oh, I'm at this area now. But for the most part, the game is kind of sectioned off, and that's a little bit of a buzzkill, but at the same time, they said early on that like, well, this game is supposed to be it's not going to be fully open world. So that's what I meant earlier when I said a semi open world action RPG. You can also cook in this game, and a lot of times you can catch fish. That was one of the things they showed, and I already mentioned the dinosaurs. You knock them out, then you cut off a piece of their tail and you eat it that way. You can also get food and veggies and fruit from trees and different farms and whatnot. And there are some camping areas, which you can see by the smoke, little campfires with like little logs that you can set on. You can eat meals there, where you can heal up and also get some stat bonuses and perks. Eating actually is pretty important to leveling up your stats, because you level up like normal in any other RPG. In fact, this game is actually pretty lenient with leveling up, because you'll usually level up as you go along in the story. You could maybe say you don't necessarily need to grind, unless you just want to have that extra edge on the opponent or the boss or whatever. Because I found that like I think last time I checked, obviously I'll see it when I record the gameplay footage, and I'll be like, oh yeah, I think my team was at like 70 or 80 or so. I believe the max is 250, I believe. I don't remember. I remember Troy told me. But, yeah, so eating actually not only does eating give you like little perks and whatnot, but also it boosts your stats permanently, along with giving you like little like boosts, like, oh, you have plus 10% melee damage for like a few fights and stuff like that. And they'll usually let you know, like usually like point like +1 or +2 like HP or whatever. They're pretty minor, but like if you eat a lot, you can really rack up the points that way. And you can eat the full course meals that you can get made from Chi-Chi, or like actual like meals that you make yourself and stuff, to like really rack up points and whatnot in different things. But like I said, although I would say the cooking is maybe a good thing to do, because you'll raise your stats, because that's one thing I noticed. Even though I was raising up in levels pretty quickly and raising my stats that way, my stats didn't really seem to be that substantial. Like, it did seem like I was having to work a little extra hard to beat some of the enemies, at least at first. I would kind of get into a groove, and when I was in a party, it seemed like the enemies were a bit easier. When I'm fighting by myself, it seems a bit harder, but when I have like my 2 peeps with me, it helps. Though I noticed that it for your teammates, and this is also true for enemies that you fight, if there's a big enough level gap, you'll only do 1 damage and vice versa. This is pretty problematic with the support characters, though what you can do with it is that they have like in their little skill tree, they'll have like a thing to where like, oh, they'll get like a plus 10 or whatever of damage done to an enemy that's like 40 levels above or whatever, and you can level that up for like even higher stuff. And so I think they did that because they knew that like based on the story, you weren't going to be having Yamcha or Tien or whoever on your team to like actually level them up. So if you actually wanted to use them, you would either have to use them when they're available or use them in the intermissions or post game. So that's pretty useful. But it would also be kind of nice if they were fully playable. Apparently, in the debug menu, you can actually play as them. Which is pretty cool, and also there's a mod where you can play as them as well. Like it does kind of seem like they're basically just characters, but like not just made playable. And they seemingly don't have the same amount of abilities and perks and stuff that the main playable characters do. But that's something you can kind of fix up, I think. So I really do hope that like maybe in a patch or DLC you'll get to play as them. We're waiting on a patch that's gonna make Trunks' time machine accessible, and we can go into the past and do some side missions that we weren't able to do, or maybe go into the past and do some new stuff. Because I know there was a mission that you could get from pre-ordering the game, but if you didn't pre-order the game, and that's one thing also that was a little frustrating. Even if you got the collector's edition, that didn't count for the pre-order bonuses. At least for me, because I bought it from Best Buy. Because I wanted to make sure I got the collector's edition, like, and like insured a copy, like, because doing it through Amazon or doing it through the Bandai Namco store can be a little tricky if you're not quick enough, and depending on the game. Like I remember, like with Tales of Berseria, like it sold out like that, like it was really fast. The collector's edition, at least. Thankfully, I was able to get one. But anyway, yeah. Food helps. I think actually the support characters do get bonuses. I'd have to. I haven't relied much on the food mechanic in this game. My favorite part, truthfully, is sort of like the campfire one. I don't know. There's something kind of cozy about it, just kind of fun. But yeah. So that's the food section. I'm trying to make sure I cover as much as I can before going into the story, because there's some stuff about that later on that kind of I wasn't too pleased with. Though that being said, I guess I can maybe go into one of the negatives I had. I kind of alluded to it earlier with the presentation. I think I might have touched on it a little bit, but it's not really the graphics and sort of like the animation fidelity that bothered me. What bothered me was some of like the just general like performance issues, and also just some minor things, like for example Piccolo and his like purple gi when he takes his hat and cape off. During the Saiyan and Frieza arc, his purple gi shirt had the cut that he had, like the V-neck cut thing that he has during the Cell arc onward, whereas at this point in the story he should be having like the regular like crew neck purple gi shirt, and that kind of bothered me a little bit. Another thing that kind of bothered me a little bit was when in between one of the fights with Nappa, I died because I was like wandering around, and then it did an autosave to right before I started flying around, and in my previous save he had his armor on, but then when I loaded the game he didn't have his armor on. So it was like, wait a second, was there supposed to be a thing where he loses his armor or something? It's sort of like this weird like performance issues here and there. I feel like part of this is maybe due to the system I'm playing on, because I'm just playing it on a regular PS4. On the back of the box it did say that it was PS4 Pro enhanceable. So I don't know, maybe playing it on a PS4 Pro or a high-end PC or an Xbox One X would make the game perform a little bit better. Not that it performed poorly. There was a couple of moments of slowdown that I noticed during like transitional sections of like menu items and also loading up areas sometimes. I don't know if they've patched that out yet, but who knows. There's also one thing that I thought was kind of... There are a couple glitches that I thought were pretty funny. The first one I saw from Miss DBZ Babe's YouTube channel, because she showed it on her channel, where in the early part of the game, you're Goku and you have Gohan with you, and you're kind of hanging out in like the woods, fishing and cooking, and Goku's doing some image training, trying to fight Piccolo. And after you eat your meal, if you go back to like the beginning part of where you started off, you'll see another Goku there. I thought that was pretty funny. It kind of reminded me of Rayman 2 on the N64 back in the day, because there was a glitch you could do for one of the beginning areas to where like you could die a bunch of times and make a second Rayman appear that's just like running. I don't remember why. And unfortunately, the website that I got the cheat code from, I say cheat code, but the site that I got the information from is unfortunately closed down. So thankfully there's a Discord server, but I'll have to check if they're still active. I'm not sure if it's still active. But then there was another one that I thought was kind of funny, where it was after Piccolo and Krillin get turned to stone by Dabura, or Dabura, as Kibito says. But after that happens, if you leave the area and then come back, Krillin and Piccolo, they'll be like in their regular like idle stance, and they'll even blink a little bit, but their actual like texture will be of like the stone. I found that kind of funny. I don't know if that was just something they missed or what, but that was kind of funny. But yeah, the glitches are kind of minor, but it did feel like there was some sort of like performance and sort of like presentation issues that I had. But I guess really all that's left is a story. So like I said, it goes through the story of Dragon Ball Z relatively faithfully. They make some changes here and there. Like one thing I mentioned in the beginning is a bit different. It's still Goku and Gohan in the woods. At this point, he's not, and unlike the anime, Goku isn't looking for Gohan. They're hanging out in our mission, like the fishing and the image training with Piccolo. Then they go to Kame House. The whole Raditz thing happens, but it's otherwise relatively faithful. One thing that I found kind of I actually kind of like this change. When Goku first sees Cell, when he's picking up Tien and Piccolo after they get beaten up by second form Cell, in this game they actually fight. And I actually thought that was kind of cool, because I think it gives Goku more of a reason to think he can't beat Cell. Because since he's never actually fought Cell in the anime and the original story, there's no real reason that he would necessarily think that or rather, I'm of the opinion that Goku probably could have beaten Perfect Cell. That's something I've been maybe kind of thinking about lately, but that's neither here or there. So stuff like that. And obviously I mentioned the intermissions and also, the side quests where they kind of touch up on stuff. If you've seen the trailers, then you know with the side missions you get to see characters like Ader, Nam, the Native American people at the bottom of Korn's Tower. I don't remember the name. I think it's like Apu and Oba, I think. I don't recall exactly. So you could do like little side quests where you get to sort of see what they're up to and stuff. And Nam's, I really liked his, and Ader's, I really liked his as well. And then there's also some that kind of play around with the lore a little bit. Like there's this one where like apparently these two animal people, according to this game, it seems like there was like a fad where people were like taking capsules, basically drugs, where they turn into animals, but they took like a higher dose, so like they're stuck in animal form. They're like, oh, we want to go back to human. That's kind of cute, but I do kind of like that the idea that in Dragon Ball they're just anthropomorphic animal people. I don't think we necessarily needed to have that kind of explanation. I know people would maybe make the argument like, well, there weren't any of those in Dragon Ball Z, but truthfully it's probably just because Toriyama forgot. That's really the only one I actually didn't really like that much. Every other side mission I was kind of okay with. There's like minor stuff. A lot of them are fetch quests, which I initially wasn't too big on, because I'm not really big on fetch quests. They just seem kind of like a pain. It didn't really bother me with this one. I guess just because it wasn't really that hard to find stuff. You can do like this sensing thing where like you go into it does like this zoom in thing you can like sense certain items, and like you can see like key, like little auras for like key and whatnot, and you can see where certain things are. That made searching for stuff a lot easier, especially for the stuff where it's like just stuff on the ground, because they'll actually enlarge the icon. I say icon, but it's like a little purple clear orb thing where like an item is, and they'll enlarge it so you can see it more clearly, and that actually really helped a lot. But yeah, they play around a little bit, but they don't do too much. It's mainly just the way the scenes are structured. They're a little different, and I guess also just the dialogue. Like I said, they kind of expand on things. Like one of the scenes they also show early on is Raditz talking to Nappa and Vegeta and how they kind of treat him like shit. Which is, that one's pretty interesting. I'm kind of interested to see if there's any of these missions that that actually came from Toriyama himself. I doubt it, but it would be interesting to kind of know how much of this was maybe, or how much of this is actually canon to the story. Which at the moment it's kind of hard to say, but I guess I should also go ahead and say that, because I already mentioned Android 21, Toa and Mira from Xenoverse do show up. They're the secret boss, or Mira's the secret boss, or a secret boss rather. Because I guess when the DLC comes out, that's also technically a secret boss. But that's kind of interesting, I think, just because it kind of makes you think about sort of like where this game kind of stands. It's almost like this is sort of like the video game version of like just the basic Dragon Ball timeline. In a way. I don't know if they're intending it that way, but I found that kind of interesting to sort of think about on that kind of level. I haven't done it yet, but I did see video thumbnails on YouTube, and I'm like, oh, that's actually kind of interesting. So I might maybe try and do that later on. You have to... There are these special enemies, I think they're called like villainous enemies or something, where they're like they're supposed to be super strong, dangerous enemies, and when you fly by them, characters will be like, oh, they look strong. That's one thing. Like these characters, Goku in particular says probably the most video gamey of all of them. Everyone else says stuff that sounds kind of natural, but Goku, whenever you're flying by an enemy, he's always all like, might cause some trouble later. Best to deal with this now. And I'm like, Goku, be quiet. And they say that a lot, and it can get kind of annoying. I'll say this about combat. That's another detriment that I have with it. Like, it seemed like fights happened a little too often. You can avoid them, but just the fact that there was always someone to fight, and I get, this is Dragon Ball Z, but like, in these, even in Tales, I'll get tired of fighting. Like, I feel like, I'm probably, I don't know if this is an odd thing to say, but in RPGs, I do get tired of fighting sometimes. And sometimes I just want to progress in the story. Even in something like Dragon Ball, to where I know the story like the back of my hand, I want to kind of keep the ball rolling, because I want to see what all the game has to offer. And it can be kind of annoying to stop and fight things. I do like the variety of enemies, like, because it starts off with you're fighting the skull pirate robots that for some reason don't have feet. You fight those, along with some like little tiny robots that I think are meant to be sort of like Dr. Giro's like scouter robots that are like check in on people to get their info for the androids in Cell. They're not actually called that, but I think design-wise that's what they're supposed to be. And then when Vegeta and them come in, the Cybermen show up, and the different color variants that you could fight. Also, when you get to Frieza, the Frieza soldiers, you can fight them. Then when you get to Cell, you fight like these Red Ribbon Army robots, and then finally when you get to Majin Buu, you fight like the Majin people that are under Babidi's spell. So there are a lot of enemies you can fight. It's actually kind of cool, and I'd be curious to see if they add any more in DLC. It might be a little too hard to, since depending on the where they take from DLC, there's not really a lot of like standard enemies that you can fight. So, but other than that, I kind of got into the groove of the combat, like I said earlier. But getting back on track with the story, up through the Cell arc was pretty good. I liked kind of everything they were doing. It was interesting to kind of see all these characters progress once again. I didn't really like that during the intermission they kept Gohan as a Super Saiyan before Majin Buu. And it's just like, I don't know why we have to have Teen Gohan be a Super Saiyan all the time, because like, after he beats Cell, he goes back to normal, and it's not like we don't have movies to sort of take designs from. Because in the BoJack movie, it was Teen Gohan, but he didn't go Super Saiyan until later on. But he's like, I want to stay Super Saiyan for, training purposes. You can maybe chalk that up to maybe laziness, that like they didn't want to model in regular Gohan, which is kind of funny because when he goes Super Saiyan, like if he goes Super Saiyan 2, he can like lose the technical Super Saiyan, but he still looks like a Super Saiyan, but you can turn into a Super Saiyan. It's kind of funny. The transformations worked about how they would expect. Kaioken, it takes away your health, and there were two really tough fights in this game. I would say overall the game was pretty easy, but there were two fights that were really tough. The first one was the first fight with Vegeta playing as Goku, because he kept spamming all of his like hyper armor moves that they do, where like they're kind of fidgeting for a little bit, and you can hit them, but they're not flinching, and then they'll do a move where like you either have to guard or move out of the way. And that got kind of annoying because it's just like I felt like even though I was doing damage, I wasn't really making like a lot of like actual real progress in the fight. I finally beat him, and funnily enough, the fight with Gohan, where you play as Gohan and you fight Vegeta right after, was a lot easier. I mainly got S's. I got like I think a couple B's and a few A's. In the rankings that they would show after each major section of the game. But the second fight, which I already talked about earlier a little bit, was the fight with Android 20 or Dr. Gero, where you play as Piccolo. That fight drove me insane because he would always get me with like his like absorption thing, where he grabs you and like puts his hand over your mouth and like takes your energy and like restores like basically all of his life. It was so annoying because like admittedly I was playing a little sloppy. I wasn't really paying attention to the patterns because for one thing, he'll say something like "I got you now" or something, and to like kind of let you know, he'll do like a pose. But also, in the corner, they would show like the name of his move, so like you could keep it in mind. So like I had to kind of sort of play a little more defensively. I finally beat him, but it took me like some time to do. I actually had to kind of take a break and stop playing because I was getting so frustrated. But I finally beat him. This actually kind of happened again with Cell the first time fighting Cell. It didn't really bother me that much. I was able to beat him. And then also I did it on accident with Yakon, because he had like his thing where he eats light and takes your energy, and I threw a Kamehameha at him, and like he took it, and like, oh shit, I forgot he could do that. I was winning, so like it didn't really bother me. But those were really the two toughest fights. I think the Vegeta and Dr. Gero one. Otherwise, I think the game is actually relatively easy. Like I said, the game is pretty lenient on giving you levels up, and it scales to where like your enemy's like a couple levels, maybe even like 5 or 6 levels above your character, so it's not really that big of a deal, I think. You would mainly run into problems if like you're not playing well, or like if you're at if like the RNG just like screws you over or something. But yeah, so then we get to Majin Buu, where for one thing, they skip a few fights. They skip the first fight with Gotenks and the Fat Majin Buu. They take out all of Tien, which that pissed me off. Like, I'm like, bro, don't do that to my boy Tien. And even when you get him back, like Yamcha has his short hair but has the gi. Krillin has his hair. Android 18 has her outfit that she wears during the tournament. But Tien just is wearing his like green pants and white t-shirt outfit that he wore during the Cell games. I'm thinking like, why didn't you guys give him like his blue sort of like traveler gi? Like that was really cool. I guess it's also technically implied that he got killed during Super Buu's like a killing all humans thing. But they also don't play any of like the junior division of the World Martial Arts Tournament, and that would have been actually a good way to let you play as either Trunks or Goten, or Kid Trunks rather, because you already get to play as Trunks. Which it kind of that was a bit of a bummer. It wasn't a big deal because quite frankly I think it would have padded the game a little too much for a section that's not really that important in the grand scheme of things. It would have been nice, but But yeah, that was a major bummer for me, and already they took out, We Got a Power as like an actual theme, like the actual theme song. they took out a decent amount of filler content as well, where I feel like here, and I'm talking generally, like I'm thinking in my mind like some of the filler content with Great Salmon, but they also took out a lot of the filler content with Gohan training for the Saiyans. That one I'm kind of okay with just because I feel like it's false character building, but it still would have been kind of cool. And also, the Garlic Jr. stuff isn't around at all. Yeah, they take out a fair amount, no filler besides the driving section, which is a pretty small section in of itself anyway, and they take out the whole thing where like they have to save a school bus, which, you know, I don't know how important it is for the grand story that Goku and Piccolo save a school bus, but because I remember actually, because I actually rewatched the episode, sometime, not super recently. Actually, it's been a few years, but I did actually watch it, at least a few years ago. So what actually happened in that episode is a little more familiar with me. Tao Pai Pai and the Crane Hermit, they show up. I didn't get any side missions with them. I think you probably should have gotten one, especially with Gohan. It would have made sense too. You know, I feel like that's sort of a missed opportunity if there actually isn't one. I think there is. I probably just missed it. I maybe have to fly around because there are some side quests that you can do after you beat the game. There's some you also unlock. So, and maybe when the time machine thing comes around, you'll be able to actually do more. But yeah. Another thing that I thought was, while it's on my mind, obviously at this point, I guess I should also say, because I was going to talk about the fight with Kid Buu. The stuff with Oob is not in the game at the moment. I imagine they're maybe saving that for DLC. I guess. Though, yeah, that would actually, yeah, thinking about it, that would actually be kind of interesting. Because then you would have 2 adult Trunkses. If you actually, if they actually do post game at that point, or if it's a thing where like you play it, and then like it rolls you back, like actual timeline story wise, but you have all the stuff that whatever you got from that section. Oh, that's another missed opportunity that I forgot. The History of Trunks special, because that's actually in the manga, so that's canon to the story, and it actually would have been really cool to have that. At least have it be a secret section that you could unlock, kind of like in Legendary Super Warriors. That actually would have been cool. Maybe like you get like some like extra move or some costumes. Like there aren't too many different clothing options either, which makes sense because these characters change their appearance at specific intervals. I guess it doesn't really make much of a difference if you can't. And I imagine when the time machine thing comes in, maybe they'll change their appearance or something, or maybe like characters that weren't there will disappear from your party or something. But yeah, to go back with Kid Buu, one thing that I thought that was kind of cool that they added, for some reason time stops when Goku finishes the Spirit Bomb and he gets his energy back. They do a thing where they are playing Chala Head and there's like one big final fight. My adrenaline was going pretty high here. This game gives me a lot of adrenaline. I did this cool thing where I did a bunch of backflips and I went Super Saiyan 3 and I did a Kamehameha and I killed him. I'm like, that's so epic. I know you can also get the Spirit Bomb as like an actual move. And apparently you can get like sort of like dramatic finishes or the equivalent to a dramatic finish in this game, I think. Troy was telling me about it. So I'm going to have to maybe try that if I get the chance, or maybe look up a video or something. But yeah, so, and then of course, after you beat Kid Buu and all that, and they do all the stuff there, which that brings, there was another thing where like when they played that scene where everyone comes back, it's Kid Dende instead of like adult Dende. So that's another oversight, which is kind of funny. There are a lot of like little glitches and like oversights in this game, I noticed. That kind of goes into the whole presentation thing. But after that, that's when the post game, which is where I'm at the moment, kind of comes into play. So you've already beaten the game, and you can just like do side quests and like fly around and play as whoever you want. Bulma alludes to being able to make a time machine. You go there, you get Future Trunks to join your party, so you have him, which is, I actually was really happy. I wanted to have Future Trunks on my team. I like the idea of having like a full party. Again, I still really hope that like the support characters become fully playable, because it would just be really cool if you could do that. Maybe give them some extra side quests too, where you can play as them. And there are also some side quests where it's like, you can't have so and so in your party. Like I did the one where like Trunks talks to Vegeta, being like, I want you to go over here, and then Goku shows up as well, and then like they fuse into Gotenks, or Goten and Trunks fuse into Gotenks, and you have to fight Gotenks as Vegeta and Goku. And that was kind of fun. But yeah, overall the story, it's generally pretty good, and I like the little additional pieces they add to the story, with the exception of the one submission with the animal capsule drugs thing. That's kind of minor. That wasn't really a big deal. It was just kind of something. It was just, that's not really where I would have taken the reasoning for there being animal people in the story. But it's no biggie in the grand scheme of things. But with the Majin Buu arc, I didn't like how they took out a decent amount of stuff that was really cool, like Tien and whatnot. And I also, this is kind of minor as well, but I think it would have been nice to maybe have more filler from the anime into the game, because that would have helped pad the game a little bit and give you more stuff to do. Because it's kind of funny. This is supposed to be sort of like the Dragon Ball Z anime as a game, but it's in some ways it's a little closer to the manga, which is kind of funny. Also considering that they take out History of Trunks, which is in the manga. I mean, yeah, where it comes in is kind of awkward, because it's after Gohan goes Super Saiyan 2, then Trunks is like, I thinking about the past, my past, which is their future, that kind of thing. It's maybe they'll add that in as DLC. That actually would have been cool. It also would have maybe be cool if they throw in some Dragon Ball stuff, just to kind of fill out the story. Like if this covers Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, that'd be great. And there's some data mining stuff that showed Beerus and Whis, as well as Super Saiyan God Vegeta and Super Saiyan Blue Vegeta, as well as some text that refers to Broly. So we may be getting Dragon Ball Super as well. So that'll be kind of interesting to see. So it could be that even though this is a Dragon Ball Z game, we may be getting, at the very least, through Super. I think realistically it should go up through Resurrection F, and then maybe if they want to make a second game that goes through Dragon Ball Super or something, or if they just want to ignore the fact that the game is called Dragon Ball Z Kakarot. And just, I guess they could have called it Dragon Ball Kakarot. That, I don't know. Who knows? Dragon Ball Z is, like the big seller. It's sort of like the key marketing value of the franchise, because most people know Dragon Ball Z. Internationally, just Dragon Ball Z is like the more popular of the two, between Dragon Ball and Dragon Ball Z, I guess, talking about when Goku's a kid and whatnot. But anyway, I guess now it's time for general closing thoughts. Overall, I liked the game a lot. Like I said, there were some presentation issues and some performance issues. I think the performance issues may have to do with the fact that I was playing on a regular PS4 and not like a PS4 Pro or a high-end PC or something. And then also like the glitches, that's kind of minor, but it's more, it kind of goes along with the presentation of the game. Like the characters being kind of standstilly. I think I attribute that more to the game being a certain style. I also think that the amount of enemies you have to fight, and sort of just how vocal the characters are, it can get a little annoying, especially when you're just trying to like go through the story. At this point, it won't really bother me too much, because like I'll want to fight things, because fighting is kind of, not only is that kind of the main point of Dragon Ball, or one of the main points, but also this being a game and an action RPG, it's pretty important to fight things. But again, like I said, like even in Tales, like I'll sometimes just get tired of fighting and I want to kind of take a pause, which I think is pretty reasonable. Though, like I said, there are ways kind of around it. You can just avoid enemies altogether, or you can if they're at a low enough level, you can like burst through them and you can still get the experience without actually having to fight them fully. Like, there's a little bit of slowdown because the game likes to do slow and be like, ooh, It's not too big a deal, but I can see where maybe it would get annoying to some people. And then also story wise, really the only thing, they're not being all the filler from the anime. That's more of a minor thing. That's more of just like a in a perfect world kind of thing. Though I think again DLC might maybe play into that, or it could, and maybe it should. And also the amount of stuff they cut from the Majin Buu arc, that was a bit frustrating. Like at least give us the whole TN thing. Let us have that. But otherwise the game was pretty good. It was very Dragon Ball. The dialogue was nice and whatnot. Some of the voice acting was a little flat, but it wasn't always the case. Even with the same character, sometimes they would have good delivery. And they also took out, I forgot, the fight with Perfect Cell and Trunks. They took that out as well. That's a pretty big fight. So yeah, so they take out actually a decent amount. That was something I actually kind of forgot. 'Cause I'm like, oh shit, that actually would have been really fun to play. So yeah, and just some story-wise, just kind of some minor things. They say like all the stuff they take out from the actual main story that maybe is padding, but at the same time, like for the sake of the story, include it. In my opinion, include it. Maybe someone will make a mod or something if they don't do it. Because the thing is, whether or not this is like my favorite Dragon Ball game, I can't say that now because of the possibilities of DLC. That's kind of what I was alluding to. I think there's a chance that some of these story issues, as well as how far the story's going to go, will come into play with DLC. So I'm kind of holding off on giving it sort of like my trophy of favorite Dragon Ball game of all time until the DLC comes out. You'll have to ask me again once the DLC is like all done within like a couple of years or whatever, however long it takes. But as it stands, it's definitely up there. Like I said, I don't know if I'd say it's my favorite Dragon Ball game. I don't even know if I'd say it's my favorite Dragon Ball game of its type because I really like the Legacy of Goku games, but those games were a little limiting in of themselves. And this game, Kakarot, kind of addresses a couple things that Boost Fury in particular didn't, like the fact that, Piccolo's a playable character in this one, so you're not just playing as only the Super Saiyans, and also just the extra characters that you have and the post-game stuff you can do. Where Boost Fury kind of does better is like the extra content that's like the movie content from the game, and also like some secret characters. And I think there might have been even a secret boss, I don't remember. But hopefully some of that stuff will be addressed in future DLC. So, yeah. Overall, it was a pretty dang good game. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I think that's what I gave it on the podcast as well. I don't remember exactly, but I definitely liked it. Just a few gripes, but overall, I thought it was a pretty good game. And I would definitely recommend it if you like Dragon Ball, or if you want to get into Dragon Ball. I think this is actually a good game to start with. If you just want to play the games, or if you just want to like get a digest version of Dragon Ball Z and kind of pick up where the game leaves off. Like if you want to play this game and then go into Super or start watching the movies or play Xenoverse or something, you can do that, I think. So this could maybe be a gateway into the world of Dragon Ball if you would like it to. But of course, coming from me, I would just say just watch the anime and read the manga, do everything and get into Dragon Ball that way because it's my favorite series. So, but yeah, pretty good game. Alrighty, this is Flamzeronic, Tasuke signing out. See you later.